Before the envelope, the morning just smelled like pancakes and salt. The morning started like any other Saturday in our house in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, with the smell of Swedish pancakes and the sound of Atlantic waves crashing against the rocky shore just beyond our backyard. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sketching the sunrise over the water, when Keith walked in carrying a manila envelope that would change everything. "Morning, sunshine," he said, using the nickname he'd given me 3 years ago when he married my mom. "Those look incredible." I glanced down at my drawing, then back at him. "Thanks. The light was perfect this morning, all orange and pink like the sky was showing off." Keith poured himself coffee in his favorite mug, the one I'd made him at summer camp that said "World's Okayest Dad" as a joke, but which he used every single day like it was made of gold. He sat down across from me, and I noticed his hands were shaking slightly. Keith only shook before big stuff: wedding vows, my first art show, and the time the car died in a snowstorm. "You okay?" I asked, setting down my pencil. "You look weird, like weirder than normal." He laughed, but it came out nervous. "Thanks for the confidence boost, Rosie." "My name is Rose Stevens, and I'm 15 years old. My biological father left when I was 2. Just packed up his guitar and his dreams of being a rock star, and never looked back. Mom and I did fine on our own for 8 years, just the 2 of us against the world." Then she met Keith Anderson at a medical conference in Boston. She was presenting her research on pediatric asthma. He was the guy who fixed the microphone when it stopped working halfway through her talk. "A biomedical engineer who saves the day," she'd told me that night on the phone. "He made everyone laugh while he fixed it, Rosie. The whole auditorium. And then he stayed to hear the rest of my presentation." They were married 2 years later, in a small ceremony on the shores of the Atlantic. I was 12, all knobby knees and braces, trying to figure out how I felt about sharing my mom with someone else. I kept my backpack by the door for months, like I could leave first if it got weird. Keith won me over slowly, patiently, never trying to be my father, just trying to be himself. He was the one who drove me to art classes every Tuesday without complaint, even though it meant leaving work early. He built me a studio space in the garage, complete with perfect lighting and a view of the lake. He learned the names of all my favorite artists and surprised me with books about them. When I won the state junior art competition last year, he cried actual tears and had my winning piece professionally framed. But he never pushed the dad thing, never asked me to call him anything but Keith, never tried to replace the ghost of a father I barely remembered. He was just there, steady as the lighthouse beam that swept across our windows every night. The kind of steady you don't notice until you need it. Now he was sitting across from me with that manila envelope, looking like he might throw up or cry or both. "Keith, seriously, you're freaking me out," I said. "Is everything okay? Is Mom okay?" "Your mom's fine. She's at the hospital doing rounds. This is about something else." He took a deep breath. "Rosie, you know I love you, right?" "Yeah, obviously." I felt my chest tighten. "Are you and Mom getting divorced? Because if you are..." "What? No, God no, Rosie, no." He reached across the table and grabbed my hand. "I'm never leaving you guys. Never. Okay, I'm messing this up. Let me start over." He stood up, paced to the window, looked out at the harbor, then came back. Classic Keith when he was nervous. Moving helps him think. 3 years ago, he began, I married your mom thinking I was just getting a wife. But I got so much more than that. I got you, this brilliant, talented, funny kid who makes me proud every single day. And I know I'm not your biological father. I know I came into your life when you were already your own person with your own history. But Rosie..." He slid the manila envelope across the table to me. "I was hoping maybe you'd let me make it official." My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside was a thick packet of legal documents. The words swam in front of my eyes, but one phrase kept jumping out. Petition for adoption. "You want to adopt me?" My voice came out as a whisper. "Only if you want me to," Keith said quickly. I've already talked to your mom and she's on board, but this has to be your choice." The word choice felt heavy in the best way. "I'm not trying to erase your biological father or pretend he never existed. I want to be your dad in every way that counts. Legally, officially, forever." I stared at the papers, then at Keith, then back at the papers. "But why now?" The question felt bigger than the room. Keith rubbed the back of his neck, another nervous habit. "Actually, there's a story there. Can I tell you something I've never told anyone? Not even your mom?" I nodded, still clutching the papers. "Remember last month when you had that severe asthma attack at school, when they called and I rushed over?" How could I forget? It was the worst attack I'd had in years. I'd forgotten my inhaler at home, and by the time Keith got there, I was wheezing so badly I could barely speak. "The thing is," Keith continued, "when I got to the school, they almost didn't let me take you to the hospital. 5-minute stretches like an hour when you can't breathe. I said I was your stepfather, and they said they needed to wait for your legal guardian. I had to argue with them, show them your mom's contact information, listing me as emergency contact. But for about 5 minutes, they weren't going to let me help you." "I didn't know that," I said softly. "I didn't want to worry you, but sitting in that hospital waiting room while they treated you, all I could think about was what if something worse had happened? What if your mom had been in surgery and couldn't be reached? What if they needed someone to make medical decisions and I couldn't because legally I'm just some guy your mom married?" His voice cracked on the last words and I saw tears in his eyes. Keith, who never cried except at Pixar movies and my art competitions, was crying. "You're not just some guy," I said firmly. You're Keith." He smiled through his tears. "I want to be more than Keith. I want to be your dad. The one who's allowed to sign your permissions, slips without question. The one who can make medical decisions if God forbid we ever need to. The one whose last name you could take if you wanted to, though that's totally your choice. Rose Stevens Anderson has a nice ring to it, but so does Rose Stevens." I looked down at the papers again. There were so many lines for signatures, so many official seals and notary spots. It looked serious and permanent and real, the kind that makes your heart race. Sometimes real is the best kind of scary. "What about my biological father?" I asked. "Don't we need his permission?" "That's already taken care of. Your mom tracked him down through his music agent. Apparently he's playing backup guitar for a cruise ship band now. He signed away his parental rights years ago. He hasn't been your legal father for a long time. I hoped he was okay, wherever the music took him. This would just make me, if you want, my legal father," I finished. "Your legal father," he agreed. "But more importantly, your chosen father. Because that's what this is really about, Rosie. Not just papers or legal rights. It's about choosing each other. I choose you, every day. Have since the moment you rolled your eyes at me at that first dinner and told me my tie was aggressively boring." I laughed, despite the tears now running down my face. "It was beige. Who wears a beige tie?" "Someone trying very hard not to seem threatening to a protective 12-year-old, he said. "Did it work?" "Eventually." I wiped my eyes with my sleeve. "Keith, Dad, I don't know what to call you if we do this." "You can call me whatever feels right. Keith, Dad, Pop, hey you, though maybe not that last one in public." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the ocean. The morning light had shifted from pink to gold, and I could see a lobster boat in the distance, checking traps along the coast. The old Portsmouth Harbor lighthouse stood sentinel on the rocky outcrop, just as it had for over a century. This view, this house, this life, none of it would exist without Keith. He'd bought this house because Mom mentioned once that I'd always wanted to live by the water. He'd insisted on the one with the best natural light for my art. "Tell me about the day you decided," I said without turning around. "Like, when did you know you wanted to be my dad?" I heard his chair scrape as he stood up, felt him come stand beside me at the window. "You want the truth? It was about 6 months after the wedding. You'd just turned 13 and your mom was at that conference in Chicago. You got food poisoning from that sketchy taco truck you insisted on trying. Oh God, don't remind me, I groaned. I thought I was dying. You were so sick, and when I came to check on you at like 3 in the morning, you were crying. Not just from being sick, but because you missed your mom. And without thinking about it, you reached out and grabbed my hand. You held on so tight and said, "Don't leave, okay?" And I sat on your bathroom floor for 4 hours, holding your hand while you suffered through it. You sang to me, I remembered suddenly, those ridiculous Swedish folk songs your grandmother taught you. My voice is terrible, but it seemed to help. And somewhere around hour 3, when you finally fell asleep still holding my hand, I realized this was it. This was what being a dad felt like, being needed, being trusted, being there even when everything's a mess, especially when everything's a mess. But you waited 2 years after that to ask. I had to, he said softly. That moment was about me realizing how I felt. But this, he tapped the papers, has to be about you. I wanted to be sure that I wasn't just the guy your mom married, but someone you had chosen too, that I had earned the right to ask. I turned to face him. Remember when I won the art competition? You were crying so hard the judge asked if you needed medical attention. That was embarrassing. No, it wasn't. It was exactly what a dad would do. My friend Maya's dad just nodded and said, "Good job." You acted like I'd won the Nobel Prize. You had copies made. You sent one to your mom in Sweden. Farmore has it on her refrigerator. She tells everyone her granddaughter painted it. Granddaughter, I repeated. She already calls me that. The whole family does. They've been not so subtly asking when I'm going to make it official. My sister Emma sent me adoption lawyer recommendations for my birthday. Subtle, I laughed. Then more seriously, what happens next if I say yes? We fill out the papers together, get them notarized, file them with the court. There's a hearing in a few months where a judge asks us some questions, makes sure this is what everyone wants. Then you're officially my daughter and I'm officially your dad. And if something happens, like another asthma attack, then I'm not just some guy in the waiting room. I'm your father, with all the rights and responsibilities that comes with, forever. Forever. Such a big word. But looking at Keith, at Dad, I realized we'd already been doing forever. 3 years of Tuesday art classes and Swedish pancakes and terrible folk songs. 3 years of him showing up again and again, choosing us, choosing me. I want to show you something, I said suddenly. Wait here. I ran up to my room, to the closet where I kept my most important things. Behind the canvases and sketch pads, wrapped in tissue paper, was something I'd been working on for months. A painting I'd never shown anyone, not even Mom. I carried it carefully downstairs and set it on the kitchen table in front of Keith. Open it, I said. He unwrapped it slowly, and I watched his face change as he realized what he was looking at. It was a family portrait, but not a traditional one. I'd painted us as we really were. Mom in her lab coat holding a stethoscope, me with paint-stained hands clutching brushes, and Keith in the middle, arms around both of us, wearing that ridiculous beige tie from our first meeting. But in the painting, the tie was covered in tiny hearts and stars and suns, all the things he'd brought into our lives. At the bottom, in my best calligraphy, I'd written the Anderson family. Rosie. His voice was thick with emotion. When did you, I started it last year, after you built me the studio. I kept adding to it, little by little. I was waiting for the right time to show you. I took a deep breath. I guess that time is now. He traced the letters of Anderson family with one finger. You already decided, before today. I think I decided that night on the bathroom floor when you sang Swedish songs to a puking 13-year-old. I just needed time to be sure, to trust it. I picked up the adoption papers. Do you have a pen? Wait, Keith said. Are you sure? Really sure? Because Rosie, I'll love you whether these papers get signed or not. You know that, right? I know, I said. But I want the world to know too. I want everyone to know that Keith Anderson is my dad, that I chose him and he chose me, and that's our story. He pulled me into a hug then, the kind that made me feel like nothing bad could ever happen as long as he was around. I could smell his cologne, the same pine-scented one he'd worn since I met him, and feel his tears dropping onto my hair. I love you, sunshine, he whispered. My daughter. I love you too, I whispered back, and then trying it out, tasting the word, Dad. We spent the rest of the morning filling out papers, Keith explaining each section, making sure I understood everything. Mom came home around noon to find us surrounded by legal documents, both of us tear-stained and grinning. I take it went well? She said, dropping her bag and coming to kiss us both. Look, I said, showing her the signature lines. Rose Stevens Anderson. I'm going to hyphenate. Keep both parts of who I am. The hyphen felt like a bridge, not a fence. Perfect, Mom said, and now she was crying too. Absolutely perfect. We need to celebrate, Keith announced. This calls for something special. Rosie, what do you want? Fancy dinner, shopping spree, trip to Paris? Swedish pancakes, I said without hesitation. The ones with lingonberries. And then maybe we can go to the art supply store. I want to start a new painting, a courthouse scene maybe, something to commemorate the day. Swedish pancakes it is, he agreed. He was already reaching for the skillet like it was part of the ceremony. But I'm also taking you to that fancy art store in Boston, the one with the gold leaf and the handmade brushes from Italy. Keith, that place is expensive. Dad, he corrected gently. And I'm allowed to spoil my daughter on the day she officially agrees to be my daughter. The court date was set for 3 months later. Keith went overboard preparing, buying a new suit, getting his hair cut, practicing what he wanted to say to the judge. I'd never seen him so nervous, not even on his wedding day. What if the judge says no? He asked the night before, pacing our living room. What if they think I'm not good enough? Then clearly they need their eyes checked, I said. Also their heart, and possibly their brain. I'm serious, Rosie. So am I. I grabbed his hands to stop the pacing. Dad, you've been good enough since day one. This is just paperwork catching up to what we already are. The courthouse in Portsmouth was old and imposing, all red brick and white columns, a testament to New England's colonial history. Our footsteps echoed as we walked to the family court division. I counted them like brush strokes, calm, careful, one after another. Keith on one side of me, Mom on the other. I was wearing my best dress, the one with tiny painted flowers that Keith had bought me for my last art show. The judge was a woman with kind eyes and silver hair. Judge Patricia Larson, said the nameplate. She reviewed our papers, asked Keith about his relationship with me, asked me if this was what I wanted. Your Honor, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. 3 years ago, a man came into my life who didn't have to love me but chose to anyway. He supported my dreams, been there for my nightmares, and shown me every single day what a father really is. These papers don't make him my dad. He already is. This just makes it official. Judge Larson smiled. Mr. Anderson, do you have anything you'd like to add? Keith stood up, cleared his throat. I could see the speech he'd practiced for weeks flying right out of his head. Instead, he just looked at me, then back at the judge. Your Honor, he started, his voice thick with emotion. I had a whole speech prepared about legal rights and responsibilities. But that's not what this is. This is about a promise I made to a sick 13-year-old girl years ago that I wouldn't leave, and a promise I make to her today, that I will always show up. I will always be there to build a studio or hold her hand or just listen. Being Rosie's dad isn't a right I'm asking for. It's the greatest privilege of my life, and I promise to spend the rest of mine earning it. Well then, Judge Larson said, signing the papers with a flourish. "By the power vested in me by the state of New Hampshire, I hereby grant this petition for adoption. Congratulations, Mr. Anderson. You have a daughter. And congratulations, Ms. Stevens Anderson. You have a father." Hearing it out loud stitched the two halves of my life together. The crack of her gavel was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. We celebrated at our favorite restaurant overlooking the Atlantic, the one where Keith had proposed to Mom years ago. The Black Trumpet had been a Portsmouth institution for years, its windows offering a perfect view of the Piscataqua River as it flowed into the sea. Keith had invited his whole family, his parents flying in from Sweden, his sister Emma from Chicago, cousins and aunts and uncles I'd been calling family for years, but who were now officially mine. "Skull!" Keith's father called out, raising his glass. "To Rose, the newest official Anderson!" "To Rose!" everyone echoed, but Keith raised his glass again. "To choosing family," he said, looking right at me. My throat did that happy tight thing again. "And to being chosen." That night, after everyone had gone home and Mom had gone to bed, I found Keith on the porch, looking out at the water. The Portsmouth Harbor light swept across the water, its lighthouse beam steady and sure, while the sound of buoy bells carried on the salt wind. "Hey, Dad," I said, sitting beside him. The words still felt new in my mouth, like a gift I was still unwrapping. "Hey, sunshine." He put his arm around me, and we sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the eternal conversation between the waves and the shore. "You know what I love about this place?" Keith said suddenly. "The history. This lighthouse has been guiding people home since 1771, through the Revolution, the Civil War, 2 World Wars, all those years, all those storms, and it's still standing, still shining." "Like us," I said. "We went through some storms, but here we are." "Here we are," he agreed, "still shining." "Thank you," I said finally, "for wanting me, for choosing me, for all of it." "Rosie," he said, "I should be thanking you. You gave me the one thing I never knew I desperately wanted. You made me a dad." A foghorn sounded in the distance, deep and mournful, and somehow beautiful. Across the water, I could see the lights of the Isles of Shoals twinkling like fallen stars. I thought about my biological father, somewhere on a cruise ship playing guitar for strangers. I hoped he was happy. I hoped he'd found what he was looking for when he left. But I knew I'd found what I was looking for, right here on this porch in this old sea-coast town, with a man who stayed. A man who showed up to every art show, who sang terrible songs when I was sick, who cried at my accomplishments and held my hand through my failures. "You know what the lighthouse keeper told me once?" Keith said. "When I was here taking photos for your birthday present, that painting of the lighthouse you loved, he said the light doesn't just guide ships. It reminds people on land that someone's watching, someone cares about bringing them home safe." I looked at the beam sweeping across the water, steady and sure. "That's what you are," I said softly. "My lighthouse. Not flashy, not loud, just there." "And you're my North Star," he replied. "The point everything else navigates by." "I'm painting you something new," I told him, "for your office, so everyone who comes in knows exactly who you are." "Oh yeah, what's it gonna say?" "World's greatest dad," I said. "Because that's what you are, not the okayest, the greatest." He squeezed me tighter. "Only because I have the greatest daughter." "We're pretty lucky, aren't we? Luck plus choices, we made both." "The luckiest," he agreed. The beam swept over us again, and I thought about its long history, witness to centuries of arrivals and departures, of storms weathered and safe harbors found. The light between us felt like that, a constant beacon we had built together, guiding us home to each other. "Come on," Keith said finally. "It's getting cold and your mom will kill me if you get sick. That Atlantic wind is no joke." 5 more minutes? I asked. This is a pretty perfect moment. I want to remember it. All the minutes you want, he said. We've got forever now. And sitting there on our porch in Portsmouth, watching the eternal dance of lighthouse beam and ocean wave, holding on to my chosen father while he held on to his chosen daughter, I knew he was right. We had forever. Not because of papers signed by a judge, but because we'd chosen each other. Because love isn't just about blood or birth or biology. Sometimes love is about Swedish pancakes and art supplies and sitting with someone on their worst day. Sometimes love is about choosing to stay, choosing to show up, choosing to be family. Sometimes love is a man with a beige tie and a nervous smile, holding out his heart and hoping you'll take it. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, love is getting to say yes. As the fog rolled in, softening the edges of the world, I finally understood why Keith loved this place so much. It wasn't just the history. It was the promise in that repeating light, a solemn vow that no matter how dark it got, a guide would be there. Keith had been guiding me home all along. I just hadn't realized home wasn't a place. It was a person. It was the man sitting beside me, humming off-key Swedish folk songs under his breath, making plans for Swedish pancakes in the morning. Tomorrow would bring new paintings to create, new memories to make, new ways to be a family. But tonight, in this moment, everything was perfect. A girl who'd found her dad. A man who'd found his daughter. A family who'd found each other. It was my dad, not a placeholder, not a step. Just my dad. "Ready to go in?" he asked. "Ready," I said, and I was. Ready for whatever came next, as long as we faced it together. Rose Stevens Anderson and her dad, officially and forever. Even when the fog swallowed the porch, the beam still knew the way. As we went inside, the lighthouse kept its watch, its beam cutting through the growing fog. It was a reminder that the best lights, the ones built on choice and love and terrible Swedish folk songs, never really go out. They just keep shining, a steady guide home.